Part 2. The moon, silver kiss beneath the cypress arch. The whispering pines of Aventine gave way to the moonlit caress of the cypress trees, their dark branches reaching up like gnarled fingers, forming a natural archway through which Lucius passed. The air grew cooler here, damp and heavy with the scent of wet earth and distant rain. As he emerged from the arch, the full moon spilled over the landscape like silver paint, transforming the familiar streets into something magical. The river Tiber, now wider and deeper, flowed like liquid moonlight, its surface a mirror, not reflecting the sky, but containing it, holding the moon within its depths. In the stillness, the sound of running water was deafening, but what startled Lucius most were the cypress trees themselves. They seemed to lean toward the river, their drooping branches mirroring the water's flow. It was as if they whispered secrets only the river could hear, sharing stories from centuries past. Beside him, the old woman in green nodded slowly. Her eyes, pools of ancient wisdom, never left the water. "They wait," she finally said, her voice like rustling leaves. "The lady of the lake waits." Turning to Lucius, she gestured to the river with a gnarled finger. "And so do I, we all do. Those who love her and those who fear her." Her gaze drifted back to the flowing water, lost in memories only the old woman knew. Lucius wanted to ask more, to delve into the layers of meaning hidden beneath her words. But something in her posture, the set of her shoulders, the faraway look in her eyes, told him that some things were best left unspoken, some wounds too deep to probe. So he stood beside her in silence, letting the mystery of the lake and the lady of the lake weave its magic around them. Time seemed to slow. The moon climbed higher in the sky, bathing the world in its silvery glow. The water sang its timeless song, and Lucius, rooted to the spot, felt a strange pull, a magnetic yearning that echoed within his soul. Suddenly, a splash broke the spell. Emerging from the water, dripping and smiling, was a young woman. She had the grace of a willow, the strength of an oak, and the wildness of the waves. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, framed a face that seemed both otherworldly and achingly human. Her eyes, deep pools of forest green, sparkled with mirth and mischief. With a flick of her wrists, she shook droplets from her chin, sending a spray of moonlight into the air. Then, seeing Lucius and the old woman, her smile widened. "Ah, friends," she cried, her voice like the chime of a distant temple bell. "Have you come to join me in my vigil? Or do you also wait for the lady of the lake?" She gestured to the river with a sweep of her arm, her laughter echoing across the water. "She is shy tonight, hiding from our mortal eyes. But I can feel her presence here, just beyond our sight, dancing in the moonlight with the fishes." Lucius found his voice, though it sounded thin and reedy compared to the woman's ringing laughter. "Who are you?" he asked, and even as he did, he knew he already knew the answer. The woman tilted her head, considering him with amusement in her eyes. "Many names have been given to me," she said finally, "names of earth and water, of moon and mist. But if you seek to know me, call me Nemu." She turned then, striding to the river's edge, and dipped a hand into the flowing water. "And who are you?" she asked, turning back to face Lucius with a smile, to wander so boldly beneath the moon's silver kiss. Part 3. Beneath the moon, says silver kiss, beneath the cypress arch, the old woman stirred beside Lucius, her cloudy eyes gleaming with unshed tears. "I am Lucius," he said, surprised by the tremor in his own voice. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "A scroll-keeper from Aventine Hill. I came following the sound of the river and the whisper of my dreams." Nemu laughed, a sound like wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. "Dreams," she mused, stepping closer to Lucius, her gaze unwavering. "Ah, the language of the subconscious. How well I remember those days when the veil between worlds was thin and dreams were my only company." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tell me, Lucius, what did the river say to you? What secrets did your dreams reveal?" Lucius hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But seeing the earnest hope in Nemu's eyes, he began to speak. He told her of the silent summons, of the nightly calls he couldn't understand, of the inexplicable pull he felt toward the river. As he spoke, he saw understanding dawn in Nemu's eyes, a knowing smile gracing her lips. When he finished, silence fell again, broken only by the lapping of water against the bank. Finally, Nemu reached out, her hand cool and smooth against Lucius's feverish skin. "It is true, then," she whispered, more to herself than to Lucius. "The Lady of the Lake stirs. She calls to one of her own." Lucius flinched at her touch, his heart pounding like a war drum. Was this real or a figment of his sleep-deprived imagination? Was he truly interacting with an entity from myth and legend? Or was he losing his mind? The old woman beside him stirred, her cloudy eyes fixed on Nemu. "You must help me," Lucius blurted out, his voice cracking. "You must show me what I must do." Nemu's smile faded, replaced by a look of deep sadness. She placed a hand on Lucius's shoulder, her touch sending shivers down his spine. "Little scroll keeper," she said softly, "you misunderstand. I cannot help you. I am not here to help you." Her gaze dropped to the river, her voice barely a whisper. "I am here to warn you." At that moment, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Lucius stumbled, catching himself on Nemu's outstretched hand. Looking up, he saw a dark shape rising from the depths of the lake. It was the old woman. She was rising from the lake, her form growing larger with every stroke, her face contorted in a silent scream. The image burned itself into Lucius's mind, seared by the raw terror in the old woman's eyes. As quickly as she had risen, the water closed over her, leaving behind only ripples and the echo of her scream. Silence fell once more, heavy and oppressive, broken only by the rushing of the water. Lucius felt a chill crawl up his spine, wrapping around his heart like icy fingers. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with fear. Nemu's eyes, usually so full of life and mirth, were now dark and haunted. She looked at Lucius, her expression grave. "That," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "is why we are here. That little scroll keeper is why we're all here." The golden glow of the oil lamps faded, taking with it the bustle and clamor of the marketplace. Above, the sky deepened from azure to navy, splashed with the first of 1,000 stars. Somewhere, a lute sang, and the voice of a street poet rang out, clear and strong. But down by the Tiber, the hum of evening Rome was a distant ache. Here, twilight fell like a shroud. Lucius moved slowly beneath the swaying branches, where the golden glow of the oil lamps faded and moonlight took over silver, soft and cool. The whispers of the Tiber guided his footsteps now, low and melodic like the murmur of a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Down by the river's edge, time seemed to stretch. The air grew still. Even the cicadas, ever present in Rome's summer nights, hushed their song as Lucius approached a structure few ever dared cross after dusk, the Pons Saturus, the Bridge of Echoes. Built of white travertine and wrapped in the vines of forgotten years, the old bridge curved like a spine over the river's slow pulse. Columns lined its length, weathered and cracked, each one carved with symbols too ancient for even Lucius' scrolls to explain. No chariots passed here. No merchants crossed it. The locals believed the bridge remembered every voice that had ever crossed it, and sometimes it whispered them back. The clack of his sandals against the worn stones was the only sound save the sighing of the wind through the weeds. Tall grasses brushed his legs, and the stench of stagnant water pricked his nostrils. Moonlight painted the broken stones in shades of gray, yet the path ahead was clear, as if someone had walked it recently. Had he been followed? Lucius quickened his pace, reaching the center of the bridge, where 5 arches curved inward like a maw, ready to swallow the light. Beneath him, the river shimmered like a mirror of stars. And then, from the shadows of the far bank, came a flickering light golden, pulsing and steady. It hovered above the ground, as if waiting. Lucius's breath slowed. He stepped forward. The light drifted deeper into the mist, past the end of the bridge, past the grasp of reason, and into the woods beyond. He followed, for the voice of the river had just begun its tale. The trees crowded close, branches clawing at the fading light as if desperate to hold it close. Their shadows twisted, forming claws and grasping hands that reached for Lucius. Deeper he went, the dry leaves crackling underfoot like brittle bones. All around, shapes shifted in the gloom, eyes glinted, and unseen things stirred. But the lure of the golden light held him fast. Then the trees parted, revealing a clearing bathed in moonlight. In its center stood a column of travertine, spiraling skyward, its peak lost in the thick canopy above. And at its base, nestled in the roots like a sleeping beast, flickered the mysterious light. As Lucius drew closer, he saw the source, a bronze mirror tarnished with age, yet polished bright in one spot, reflecting the moon above. Who placed it here? Why? What purpose did it serve? So many questions echoed in the stillness, unanswered, unheard. He circled the monolith, searching for a clue, a name, a symbol, anything that could shed light on this forgotten place. But the stone was bare save for the carvings at its peak, too high for him to see. Then Lucius noticed the ground before the pillar, disturbed. Someone had been here recently, not a moment ago. And there, half hidden in the grass, lay a cloak, dark wool, heavy with the scent of rain and dust. With careful steps, Lucius picked it up. Its owner had been close to the circle when the moon hit its zenith, he realized, turning the cloak until he saw the fastening loop. There, a single silver clasp shaped like a crescent moon. A chill snaked down Lucius' spine. The moon circle. What was he to make of this? What purpose did it serve? The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. He heard the whisper of movement in the trees, felt the prickle of eyes on his neck. Had he been followed? Was he in danger? Fear coiled in his gut, cold and constricting. His hand instinctively went to the dagger at his waist, a small comfort in the sea of darkness. But then he heard it again, a sound so familiar, so haunting. A lute, singing a melody that tugged at his heartstrings. Slowly, hesitantly, Lucius started toward the sound, drawn like a moth to a flame. Through the trees, he saw the flicker of a fire and the dancing shadow of a woman. Hope surged, chasing away the fear. Perhaps he wasn't alone in this wood after all. As he emerged into the firelight, he saw her. Seated on a moss-covered stone, her back to him, was a woman unlike any he'd seen in Rome. Her hair was the color of midnight, her shoulders adorned with feathers that glistened like stars. Her fingers, long and slender, danced on the strings of a silver lute. And as she played, the melody wove magic in the air, weaving tales of starlight and dreams. Her name, he knew, was Lyra, daughter of the forest, keeper of the old ways, weaver of dreams and starlight. The legends were true. She was real. And he, Lucius Flavius, had found her. In awe, he stood frozen, drinking in the sight, listening to the song that poured from her like liquid moonlight. And then, as if sensing his gaze, Lyra turned. Her eyes, pools of starlight, met his, and a smile touched her lips, a smile as radiant as the dawn. Time stilled. The world shrank, leaving only Lucius and Lyra bathed in the firelight, connected by the song that echoed in their hearts. He wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, to reach out and touch the starlight in her hair, but no sound formed. His throat was hoarse, his tongue heavy. He could only stare, entranced, as Lyra rose, her eyes never leaving his. She beckoned with a finger, and Lucius, compelled by an unseen force, took a step forward, then another. The firelight glinted on her teeth, sharp as a wolf's, as she smiled again, revealing canines that were just a little too long, a little too sharp. And in that instant, something in Lucius snapped. The awe faded, replaced by instinct honed over years on the battlefield. This was no ordinary woman. He could feel it in his bones, smell it on her like the musk of a predator. His fingers tightened around his cloak, his knuckles whitening. He wanted to run, to get as far away from this clearing as possible, to forget he ever saw Lyra or the unsettling glint in her eyes, but his feet were rooted to the spot. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. As if reading his thoughts, Lyra tilted her head, a predatory gleam in her eyes. The smile never faltered. "You seek answers," she said, her voice like the chime of a silver bell, yet laced with something sharp, something wild. "I can give you what you seek." But her eyes flashed. "There is a price for all things, little Wolf." The fire crackled, casting grotesque shadows on the trees behind Lyra. Her song had ended, replaced by an unnerving silence. The forest held its breath, watching, waiting. And Lucius knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that whatever answer Lyra gave, whatever bargain she offered, the price would be steep, the consequences dire. Still, the questions burned in his mind, demanding answers. Who was he to turn away from such a mystery? What secrets did Lyra hold? What brought Lucius to this moonlit clearing in the heart of the Whispering Woods? He was a soldier, a man of action, not a supplicant begging for mercy. Taking a deep breath, he straightened his shoulders, meeting Lyra's gaze with a newfound resolve. "Name your price," he said, his voice echoing in the stillness, "and let us make a bargain." Lucius squinted, shielding his eyes against the weak sunlight that filtered through the thick canopy above. The soft golden light danced ahead of him, never too far, never too near, just enough to guide him gently into a realm that felt forgotten by time. The air changed as he entered the grove. Gone was the crisp river breeze. Here, the scent of wild laurel, night violets, and old marble filled the stillness. The trees thickened and stretched high above, their dark leaves forming a silent cathedral where moonlight fell in gentle pools upon the earth. He had stumbled upon this place by accident, drawn by a sudden, inexplicable urge to explore the farthest reaches of the imperial estate. What had begun as a casual stroll had become a deep foray into unfamiliar woods, where gnarled trunks and creeping vines obscured any trace of path. But the sun was sinking now, and shadows lengthened, stretching and twisting like grasping claws. Panic tightened its icy fingers around Lucius's heart. How could he have been so careless? What if he spent the night lost in this god-forsaken wilderness? What if he never found his way back to the estate, to his life? He broke into a run, stumbling over roots and rocks, desperate to find the safety of the river, the comfort of the well-trodden road. But just as despair threatened to consume him, the frantic beating of his heart slowed. As if in mockery of his plight, a low chuckle echoed through the trees. Startled, Lucius stopped, his breath ragged in his chest. Was he alone? Or had some forest spirit risen to claim another victim for its endless night? He strained to listen. Only silence answered him. Gathering what little courage he could, Lucius started forward again. Then he saw them, statues, dozens of them, perhaps more, scattered through the grove like ancient sleepers turned to stone. Men and women, children and beasts, all captured mid-motion as if frozen in a dream. They were crafted in a variety of styles, yet shared a common grace, an easy flow of muscle and sinew that spoke of a practiced hand. But it was their expressions that truly captivated Lucius, for each face was soft with peace. Eyes closed, hands at rest. Some knelt beside shallow basins where water still trickled. Others stood, heads tilted to the sky, lips parted as though whispering to the stars. Lucius stepped carefully among them, the soft sound of his sandals brushing moss from the ancient stones. He recognized none of these figures, not from any temple, not from any history. The toga of a Roman senator, the flowing robes of a Greek priestess, the scaled armor of a barbarian warrior. All were here, yet none were named, none were revered, and yet he felt it. There was something sacred here, not in the way of marble gods or imperial shrines, but in a deeper way, in the hush of the place, in the way the wind moved like breath between the statues, and how even time seemed to slow to a murmur. He walked until the trees thinned, revealing a small pool nestled in the crook of two ancient oaks. Sunlight slanted through the branches, painting the still water in shifting patterns of gold. And there, seated on a moss-covered stone, was another statue. This one, unlike the others, fashioned not from cold marble, but warm, living flesh. A young woman cradled a spear in her left hand, while her right rested lightly on the head of a magnificent stag that stood beside her. Her head was turned, her lips parted as if she had just spoken, or perhaps was listening to some sound only she could hear. Her eyes, a startling emerald green, were fixed on some distant point beyond the pool. Lucius hesitated, unsure if he should disturb her. Yet something about her resolute stance, the quiet strength that emanated from the statue, compelled him forward. As he approached, he noticed a faint tremor in the air, a subtle vibration that quickened in pace as he drew closer. Tentatively, he reached out, touching the rough bark of the oak behind her. The vibration intensified, resonating through the tree and up his arm. Fear pricked at him, urging him to pull away. But before he could, the statue stirred. She turned her head, those unsettling green eyes boring into him with an intensity that stole his breath. Lucius stumbled back, knocking over a nearby stone. The noise shattered the stillness, and with a start, the statue became a woman. She rose gracefully from the stone, extending a hand to steady herself. Tall and slender, with skin the color of burnished copper and eyes like polished emeralds, she was clad in a simple tunic and trousers of supple leather. A silver chain glinted at her throat, and a quiver of arrows was slung across her back. Her gaze unwavering, she regarded him for a long moment without a word. Her expression was unreadable. Lucius swallowed, struggling to find his voice. "Who are you?" he managed at last. The woman inclined her head, her gaze sweeping over him with an intensity that made him feel exposed, judged. "You're a long way from the road, little lion cub," she said, her voice like the chime of a silver bell. "What brings you to this forgotten place?" Lucius hesitated, surprised by the amusement in her tone. I was exploring," he stammered, suddenly ashamed of his carelessness. The woman smiled then, and the gesture transformed her features, softening the sharp angles, making her seem both younger and ageless at once. "Exploring," she echoed, stepping closer. "Is that what they taught you in the city? That the world is wide open for the taking, its wonders meant for your amusement?" Her tone was gentle, yet there was a world of weariness in her voice. Lucius flushed, meeting her steady gaze. He had come to mock the gods, to scoff at the superstitions of the common folk. And what had he found instead? A wisdom that belied her youthful features, a strength that challenged his own. For in this forgotten grove, the boundaries of his understanding had been shattered, replaced by a humbling sense of awe. The woman regarded him for a long moment in silence, then beckoned with a tilt of her head. "Come," she said softly, "and I will show you the way." Lucius hesitated, torn between the desire to escape and the unexpected pull he felt towards her. In the end, curiosity won out. He followed her deeper into the grove, past the silent statues towards the sound of trickling water. As they walked, he struggled to understand what had brought him here, what he hoped to find. The answers, he sensed, lay not in words, but in the depths of his own being, in the stirring of emotions long ignored, buried under layers of cynicism and scorn. For Lucius had come seeking solace from a world that had grown too small, too suffocating. And in this forgotten corner of the empire, he had found something far greater than he had ever imagined. A sanctuary, a challenge, a glimpse of a truth that lay dormant within him, waiting to be awakened. It began as all good stories do with a walk, in this case along the Tiber River at twilight, enjoying the company of a dear friend who would soon be gone, at least for a while. We strolled past the place where the great poet Ovid was banished to die and paused by the picturesque Ponte Sisto, or Sixtus Bridge, so named because the saintly Pope Sixtus IV passed away while visiting this very spot in 1590. Then, just as we rounded the bend to cross the island known as the Isle of the Four Bridges, I heard it. Though there was no wind, the reeds by the riverbank swayed gently as if disturbed by some unseen breeze. And carried on those whispers, I heard my name, gentle and far away. The voice called Lucius by name once more, like a breeze passing through reeds. It was not alarming. It felt familiar, like a memory returning home. "Did you hear that?" I asked, turning to my companion, hoping he had heard it too. But he only shook his head, smiling indulgently at my flights of fancy. It must have been the wind, I told myself, and we continued our walk. But after a few moments, as we approached the church of San Bartolomeo alla Sola, the same reeds by the riverbank swayed once more. This time, the voice called out again, and I could not ignore it. I stopped. "Can you hear that?" I asked, turning back to my friend, my brow furrowed in concentration. Still, he only shook his head and smiled indulgently once more. "Let us go," he said, taking my arm. "It is late, and I want to get home before the evening chill takes hold." I wanted to go home too, but I could not tear my attention away from the beckoning reeds. I resisted my friend's gentle pull and turned back toward the sound. "I am sorry," I told him. "Something is calling me, and I must go see what it is." His smile faded, and he laid a comforting hand on my shoulder. "As you wish," he said quietly, "but be careful. The night is dark and full of dangers." I nodded and thanked him. Then, without another word, I turned and walked away. The reeds rustled and whispered, and I followed their song until it led me deep into the shadowy heart of the island. There, hidden among the trees and vines, was a path I had never seen before. With each step I took into the darkening woods, the song grew louder, and with it, my determination to follow where it led. I did not know what lay ahead, but something compelled me forward, irresistibly, inexorably. After a few minutes of walking, the trees began to thin, and the shadows receded, giving way to an open glade bathed in moonlight. At its center stood an enormous laurel tree, older than Rome itself, its gnarled bark etched with spiraling symbols and names lost to time. The roots stretched like a woven tapestry across the earth, forming natural seats, steps, and a shallow pool where spring water bubbled and shimmered. Beneath the boughs sat a figure. She was veiled in white, her hands resting upon her knees. Still as the marble figures that line the Spanish steps, yet alive, unmistakably alive. Her breath matched the rhythm of the leaves above, and a faint smile played upon her lips. As I approached, she raised her head and gazed upon me with eyes that twinkled like distant stars. Then she spoke, and her voice echoed gently in my mind rather than with her lips. "Lucius," she spoke once more, and the name trembled like a drop of water falling into a still basin. "Welcome, Lucius, to the Grove of Sleep." I lowered my head in reverence, though I did not know why. "You were chosen," she said, "not for strength, but for silence, not for answers, but for the way you listen, not for power, but for the questions you ask, not for riches, but for the journey you take, not for victory, but for the battles you leave behind. You were chosen," she repeated softly, "for balance." I blinked, startled by these cryptic words and the sudden realization that I had not known how deeply I longed to hear them. The lady in white gestured toward the pool at her feet with a delicate sweep of her white-gloved hand. "Look," she said. I knelt beside the shimmering water and gazed into its depths, and there I saw visions. First, I saw a majestic temple nestled among hills, its marble columns wreathed in emerald ivy. Then a black ship sailing majestically under a sky full of stars, pursued by shadowy wraiths. Next, I saw a handsome man wearing a golden mask, his features obscured, his expression inscrutable. After that, I saw a lone wolf slinking through the silver moonlight, its eyes gleaming with primal fire. Finally, I saw a Roman coin spinning endlessly in midair, tossed by an unseen hand, forever suspended between heaven and earth. When the visions faded, I turned back to the oracle and asked, "What do they mean? What does it all mean?" But the oracle only smiled mysteriously and said, "Rome has many faces, and tonight it will show you one more." Then, from within the tree itself, I heard a sound. It was a creaking sound, like ancient wood shifting awake. I looked up to see a branch detaching itself from the trunk, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, revealing a hollow space behind. My gaze shifted to the gnarled roots below, which had also begun to writhe and twist, weaving themselves into a staircase, spiraling down into darkness. With trembling limbs, I rose and approached the opening among the roots. As I hesitated, the oracle gestured toward the staircase with an encouraging smile. "Go on," she whispered. "Your journey begins now." I nodded, though I did not know where the path would lead. Still, something compelled me forward, and so I descended into the earth. I fell down a long, winding tunnel, tumbling through a kaleidoscope of sights and sounds that shifted and swirled around me. When I finally came to a stop, I found myself in a spacious chamber illuminated by a soft, ethereal glow. Before me stood a towering archway adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change as I gazed at them. Above, the ceiling was lost in shadow, but from its depths came a gentle hum that resonated deep within my bones. Beside me, the tunnel I had fallen through had vanished, leaving me in this cavernous chamber with only the mysterious archway as a way out. Cautiously, I stepped forward and placed my hand upon the cool stone of the archway. As I did, the carvings seemed to coalesce, resolving into images that stirred memories within me. A roaring crowd, the clanging of arms, the flash of a gladiator's sword, the gasp of the audience. A stern-faced emperor mounted on a golden chariot, his eyes sharp and unwavering. A senator in flowing robes, his face etched with wisdom and weariness. A young mother cradling a babe, her eyes filled with hope and fear. A black ship sailing into the sunset, pursued by shadowy wraiths. Each image was like a key, unlocking fragments of a forgotten past, stirring emotions that had long lain dormant within me. When the visions faded, I felt a surge of understanding. These were not mere images. They were echoes of Rome's soul, its triumphs and tragedies, its hopes and fears, its light and darkness. And in that moment, I knew that I had been chosen to carry a part of that legacy forward, to be a conduit between the echoes of the past and the hopes of the future. With renewed purpose, I stepped through the archway and found myself in a vast, echoing hall. In the distance, I saw a faint glow, like the glimmer of a flame in the darkest night. Hope surged through me, chasing away the lingering shadows of doubt and uncertainty. Guided by that tiny spark, I began to walk forward, eager to see where it would lead. And that is where our story will continue next week. Until then, I invite you to join me on social media. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm here today with something different. This is an excerpt from a work in progress, a fantasy story about a young man named Lucius who discovers a secret entrance to an ancient magical place. What do you think so far? Do you want to hear more of this story? Okay, let's jump into this deeper dive. We find our story beginning with Lucius standing at the mouth of a hidden passageway. Earlier in the story, he discovered this opening while walking around, exploring the city of Cala. But I wanted to take my time setting the scene so that we have a sense of place before dropping Lucius into the action. Take a look at the first lines of this passage. I love them because they get us right to the point of action. Lucius stood at the mouth of the hidden passage, a breath away from the dark beneath the laurel tree. The golden light drifted downward slowly, gently, not pulling him, but welcoming him, like an old friend at the threshold. Right away, we are thrown into the scene and immediately shown the main character. We don't get much beyond that, just his name and the fact that he is standing in front of a dark opening under some laurels. All that said, we get a lot of information through the rest of the sentence. I love the way the author uses personification to show how the light treats Lucius like a friend. The sentence has a nice rhythm to it. There are several internal rhymes with light, slowly, gently, and pulling him, which makes it sing. And there's also the alliteration of golden light. By showing us the light drifting down to greet Lucius, the author plants a contrast between the darkness below and the brightness above. There's an invitation happening here, and the reader is invited alongside Lucius. The next paragraph is where we see Lucius make the decision to enter. Each step he took echoed faintly through the earthen corridor, softened by the moss that lined the floor. The roots formed natural arches over his head, thick and braided like the arms of ancient gods. Again, we're getting lots of sensory detail, but now we're moving. We can feel the earthiness of the passage through Lucius's footsteps, hear the muffled echoes. We can almost touch the moss lining the floor. And again, that lovely use of personification comparing the roots to the arms of ancient gods. I love this. It feels epic and yet intimate at the same time. Now, I didn't actually plan for this to be an earth tone kind of video, but look at how naturally that's coming through in the writing. The repetition of heart consonants like in, thick, and braided gives the passage a feeling of solidity and strength. You can almost see the patterns made by the sun shining through the openings above. There's an interplay of light and shadow happening in the scene, both literally with the light filtering through the trees and metaphorically with the path that Lucius is on. In many myths and legends, entering the underworld is often accompanied by a descent into darkness. But here the focus is on the golden light. Even when describing the darkness beneath the laurel tree, the author focuses on the light. The roots form natural arches over his head, thick and braided like the arms of ancient gods. Each step he took echoed faintly through the earthen corridor, softened by the moss that lined the floor. The air was cool, damp, and rich with the scent of deep earth, wild honey, and time itself. Now, this is what I call world building. From the feel of the ground to the sound of his steps to the smells in the air, the reader is fully immersed in this moment alongside Lucius. If I were there, I would expect to taste the dampness in the air too. I can feel the coolness on my skin and hear the faint echo of my own footsteps. And then the plot thickens. As Lucius moves forward, small stone alcoves appeared along the walls, each holding an offering, a bronze ring, a vial of rose oil, a child's toy carved from olive wood, and countless coins, some dull with age, others shining as if placed just moments ago. These were the forgotten offerings, gifts once left for gods or spirits, tucked away by those who had no temple or priest to speak for them. Simple hopes, quiet griefs, dreams too delicate for public display. So much is revealed in this paragraph. We learn about the place that Lucius has entered. It's a place where people come to leave gifts, but not just any gifts, offerings to forgotten deities. Throughout history, people have always found ways to communicate with the divine. They've built huge temples, held great festivals, and created intricate rituals. But sometimes all someone needs is a quiet corner and a heartfelt prayer. Maybe you've been in this kind of situation, needing to talk to someone, anyone, about something that's been weighing on your heart. Perhaps you found yourself in a crowded room, overwhelmed by the noise and chaos, unable to open up. Then you step outside, maybe onto a quiet balcony or a secluded patio, and in the stillness, you share your thoughts. You pour out your heart, whispering hopes and fears into the quiet. That's the feeling I get from these forgotten offerings. Here's an interesting thing I noticed while reading this. The author never says who these offerings are for. We could assume that they're for forgotten gods, but there's nothing explicitly stated. Instead, the author leaves it up to our imaginations. What might these offerings be for? Who might be receiving them? Is there a deity, a spirit, an ancestor, or perhaps something else entirely? By not providing a clear answer, the author invites us to consider the possibility that these offerings could be intended for anyone or anything that might listen, including ourselves. After all, what are our dreams, hopes, and fears, if not offerings to the idea of something greater than ourselves? But our moment of reflection is interrupted by Lucius's discovery of the handprints. He slowed to read each one with his eyes, and though no words were spoken, he felt their stories. A woman asking for her son's safe return from the sea. A soldier praying not for victory, but for peace. A baker thanking the sun for one more morning of warmth. The golden light pulsed brighter near a wall carved with hundreds of tiny handprints, layered upon one another like a silent choir of prayers. This is such a powerful moment. The idea of the handprints as a choir is such a striking image. It suggests that these prayers and desires are echoing throughout time, a chorus of voices reaching out to be heard. Lucius doesn't need words to understand the offerings. He can feel their emotions, their hopes and fears. He connects with these individuals, these nameless characters whose stories are forever etched in this place. In a world often dominated by grand narratives and sweeping histories, it's easy to forget that every major event is made up of countless individual stories. These handprints, these whispers against the wall, are a reminder of that. They're a testament to the power of community and shared humanity, and then comes the twist, and then he noticed something strange. One handprint glowed faintly. It was his own. He reached toward it, and as his palm met the stone, a soft warmth spread through his fingers. The wall responded with a low hum, and a hidden panel began to shift open. Beyond it, there was no tunnel. It was a garden, hidden, ancient, alive. Isn't that always the way with magic? Just when you think you've figured it all out, when you think you've categorized and understood everything, it throws you a curveball. Magic defies logic. It challenges our understanding. It reminds us that there are things beyond our comprehension. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this excerpt. Would you want to explore this magical place yourself? And what do you think will happen next? Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an upload. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. A chilly wind whipped across the Aventine Hill, biting through Lucius's thin tunic and tugging at his sandals. Above, a thin layer of clouds hid the face of the moon, promising a night of storms. Lucius pulled his cloak tighter, thankful for the shelter of the temple's porch, though it did little to keep out the wind. But he had somewhere to be, someone to meet. So he pressed on, forcing his way past the last of the evening worshippers, and ignoring their startled cries and questions. They knew him only as a scholar, a dreamer, one of the many youths who came to the city seeking knowledge. What they did not know, could never know, was the true purpose that drew him here. Not for the first time. He walked quickly down the twisting via sacra, dodging vendors and soldiers alike, until he came to a familiar wine shop tucked between a fishmonger and a brothel. The sign creaked in the wind, depicting a stern-faced Dionysus holding a thyrsus high. Inside, the smell of wine and resin battled for dominance, but Lucius cared little for either. His eyes were fixed on the back room, where a wizened old man sat behind a counter piled high with scrolls and vials. No ordinary merchant, this. This was Marcus, keeper of secrets and dealer in dreams. And tonight, Lucius would pay dearly for a taste of what slumbering Rome remembers. Marcus eyed him from over his counter, his smile as sharp as a shard of glass. So, you have come for another story, eh, Lucius? You never stop coming back for more. Are you sure your mind can bear it? Lucius met his gaze unflinchingly. I am a vessel, Marcus, empty and waiting to be filled. Give me the dreams of Rome. The old man sighed theatrically, ran a hand down his long white beard, then reached under the counter and produced a small clay jar filled with a cloudy liquid. It looked like nothing so much as vinegar, but it smelled like crushed blossoms and distant seas. Be careful, child, Marcus rasped, handing it to him. What I am about to give you will not stay contained for long. Soon enough, the entire city will remember its forgotten dreams. Whether that is a blessing or a curse is beyond my concern. With those words, Lucius took the jar and hurried out of the shop, clutching it close, feeling its weight pulling him down like a stone. The rain had begun now, fat drops splattering against the wet stones, but Lucius barely noticed. He had somewhere important to go. As the stone panel slid aside with a sigh, Lucius stepped quietly into the hidden garden. It felt like a dream. Vines of soft silver green wound gently around columns so old they had nearly become trees themselves. Soft blue moss blanketed the ground, glowing faintly like starlight caught in earth. The air was cooler here, as if the moon herself breathed upon the soil. And above there was no sky. Instead, thick roots curled high above in sweeping arches, woven like the ribs of an ancient cathedral. Drops of water clung to them, falling slowly into small pools below, each one catching glimmers of moonlight that filtered in through secret cracks in the earth. He had found this place by accident months ago, drawn by a strange energy, and had kept its location a secret ever since. It was a refuge from the noise and grime of Rome, a place of whispering trees and still water. But now he saw it was more than that. Clutching the jar, he could feel its power pulsing in time with his own blood. It was magic, ancient and wild, sleeping beneath the heart of the city. Closing his eyes, Lucius inhaled deeply, letting the scent of damp earth and blossoming night flowers fill his lungs. Then, taking the clay jar in both hands, he tipped it slowly and let some of its contents spill over the roots. The liquid sizzled as it hit the parched earth, then seeped into the cracks, disappearing from sight. As the last drop fell, the roots pulsed with newfound life. The pools shimmered, and the arching roots overhead seemed to stir. Lucius watched, mesmerized, as the moss beneath his feet began to glow brighter, bathing the garden in soft blue light. The scent of blossoms grew stronger, mingling with the smell of rain and ozone. Then he heard a sound. It started small, like a whisper at the edge of hearing. But as the light grew, so did the sound, swelling into a great thundering roar. Startled, Lucius stumbled back, watching in awe and terror as the roots erupted from the ground, smashing the stone and tearing up the earth. They writhed and twisted, lashing out like the limbs of some slumbering beast, crashing through the stone walls of the garden and bursting forth into the night. Turning, he fled, racing through the twisting streets, the sound of shattering stone echoing behind him. He dared not look back, but he knew the garden was gone, destroyed as surely as if an earthquake had struck. When he finally slowed, gasping for breath, the sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn was near. Pushing a stray lock of hair from his eyes, he looked around, realizing with a jolt that he had stopped in the Forum. The streets were deserted at this hour, the usual bustle of merchants and market-goers absent while the city slept. But he could hear the faint sound of hammering and scraping from the nearby Aventine Hill. The emperors were stirring. Another day of work and politics was beginning. And as the sun rose higher, casting its golden light across the Forum, Lucius hurried away, melting into the crowd, the dreams of Rome heavy in his heart. He tried to ignore it, to focus on his studies and the research that had brought him to the city in the first place. But the jar was still there, hidden beneath his bed, throbbing with power. And he could still hear the echo of that unearthly song. Marcus had been right. The jar was a curse, a gaping wound in the carefully constructed peace of Rome. He had unleashed something ancient and wild, something that did not belong in the waking world. But he could not seal the jar again, not without help. And for that help, he would need to journey far from Rome. As the days passed, Lucius grew thinner and haunted, his eyes dark with weariness. The city itself seemed to sigh with a deep, wordless sadness, as if it too remembered the dreams that stirred within the earth. The weight of Rome pressed down on him, suffocating him, stealing his sleep, and replacing it with unsettling dreams of vines, roots, and a woman with eyes like pools of starlight. The melody from the garden echoed through his waking hours and haunted his slumbers. There was nothing for it. He must return to the garden, seek out the woman of the roots, and beg her aid. With the jar clutched tight, Lucius slipped from his room and moved silently through the shadows. He avoided the forum and the crowded streets, drawing closer to the Aventine Hill. As he approached the spot where the garden had been, he could feel the jar thrumming in his hands, guiding him to the place where the roots still stirred beneath the surface, and there, nestled between two crumbling pillars, he saw it. A single vine, wreathed in silver, unfurled from the ground, tipped with a single leaf that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Hope surged through him. It was a beacon, a signal that the woman was here. And with her, perhaps, was the key to ending the curse. He touched the vine tentatively, and it responded instantly, coiling around his fingers with surprising strength. Then, as if beckoning, it pulled him gently, urging him to follow. Trusting it, he let himself be led deeper and deeper beneath the ruins, deeper than he had ever been before. At last, the vine halted, and he could hear the sound of flowing water. The vine pulled back, revealing a staircase carved into the living root of the hill. It spiraled down into darkness, disappearing into the shadows. With a deep breath, Lucius stepped onto the first step and began to descend. The dreams of Rome awaited. When Lucius woke, he knew he was not in his bed. In fact, he wasn't anywhere in particular. He was simply somewhere between waking and sleeping, aware but unmoored, hovering between life and dreams. Panic clawed at him, threatening to yank him back to wakefulness and the crushing weight of reality. But then a voice cut through his terror, low and soothing like warm-honeyed wine. Not unkind, yet utterly without inflection or emotion. It was as if someone had wound a lute to its tightest pitch and plucked the string, creating a single note that held no melody, only perfect tone. The note resonated within him until his terror ebbed away and he relaxed. The note became a tune, a lullaby carried on the breath of wind chimes. Slowly, surely, the tune pulled him deeper into slumber. When Lucius awoke again, he was lying on steps, cool stone pressing against his cheek and eyelids. He blinked up at the ceiling. The air hung heavy with salt, thick enough to taste like tears on his tongue. Above him, hundreds of tiny lights twinkled like fallen stars embedded in rock. As he sat up, Lucius realized he was at the top of a long flight of stairs. Before him, the steps continued down into darkness. At the base of the stairs, he could just make out the faint outline of a doorway. Beyond that, nothing but impenetrable gloom. Something about the scene both compelled and repelled him, though he couldn't have said why. Lucius hesitated for a moment longer, then started down the stairs. Each step was smooth and slightly warm, carved of translucent stone, veined with soft blue and pearl-white streaks. They hummed faintly with power when he pressed his palm against them, but otherwise made no sound. The gentle sound of waves rose from below, slow, steady, and impossibly distant, as though the sea had found a way to sing beneath the city. When he reached the bottom, he found himself inside a vast underground chamber. The air here was still and reverent. No breeze stirred the shadows or set the dust motes dancing in the dim light. No dripping water disturbed the silence. Only the rhythmic lull of waves echoed from some unseen source. The room was circular, and Lucius estimated its diameter to be around 30 paces. Its walls were sheer and smooth, stretching upward into darkness, disappearing from sight. Around the room, near the top, Countless points of light glittered like stars trapped in rock. Salt crystals, Lucius realized, must have dripped from the ceiling long ago and hardened over time. At their base, pools of water stretched out in long, narrow channels, perfectly still, fed by slow drips echoing like heartbeats. It was quiet, deeper than quiet, sacred silence, no wind, no footsteps. Even Lucius's breath seemed to hush itself in reverence. The place emanated an ancient peace that soothed his troubled mind, bringing a calmness he hadn't felt in years. Along the walls, small altars had been carved directly into the salt. Upon each one rested a memory, a tightly sealed scroll, a clay cup, a lock of hair bound in gold thread, the fragment of a legendary's armor. Most were too corroded or decayed for Lucius to make out any details, but he understood their purpose. Here, long ago, people had come to leave behind what they could not bear to carry. Some had brought offerings. Others had come to shed their burdens. All had sought solace or absolution, or perhaps just a listening ear. As Lucius walked around the room, he noticed a large pool in the center, far larger than the others and filled with a shimmering, almost luminescent water. He approached it slowly, mesmerized by its beauty. Kneeling down, he saw his own reflection staring back, but it wasn't his face he saw. It was a younger version of himself, barely a boy, gazing back with wide, innocent eyes. Then the reflection shifted. The boy grew older, becoming the man Lucius once was, tall and strong, with a full head of dark hair. But there was something different about this version of Lucius, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. More vital, more alive. Yet there was sadness in his eyes, a deep, abiding sorrow that resonated with a pain Lucius had long buried within himself. The reflection continued to age until it was an old man, gnarled and shriveled. And in those cloudy eyes, Lucius saw a lifetime of regrets and a deep weariness of the world. Then the reflection faded to nothing at all, leaving only ripples on the water. A single phrase echoed in his mind, though it came from nowhere. Only in silence can we remember who we were before the world told us. But whose story was that? His? If these were his memories returning to him, why did he not recognize them? Had he truly forgotten, or had he never known? The question echoed unanswered in the vast chamber, bouncing off the cold, uncaring walls. Suddenly, the stillness was complete, until far in the distance a bell rang, one soft toll like a ripple across still water. And then the pools began to move. A current had returned. It snaked through the chamber, rising from the center and flowing toward the far wall, where the doorway yawned like a gaping maw. The current flowed faster now, pulling with a gentle but irresistible force. Lucius hesitated for a moment, torn between his desire to escape and an overwhelming sense of foreboding. Whatever lay beyond that doorway, it was calling to him, beckoning him forward with an urgency he couldn't ignore. Taking a deep breath, he let the current wrap around him, lifting him off his feet and carrying him toward the mysterious passage. The passage was dark, but not in a way that blocked all light. Rather, it was empty of color, drained of vibrancy, as though all hues had been sucked dry like water from a sponge. It was silent, too, not in a peaceful way, but in an oppressive, suffocating manner. The very air seemed to hold its breath, making it impossible for Lucius to hear anything at all, not even his own heartbeat. Still, the current carried him deeper inside, guiding him through the tunnel with an inexorable pull. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into another vast chamber. This one was larger than the last, with higher ceilings and grander proportions. The same style of crystal-studded ceiling gave way to walls that were decorated with strange, unsettling patterns. To Lucius's keen eyes, the designs were disturbingly familiar, reminding him of arcane sigils and forbidden lore he'd long ago tried to forget. There were other things in the room that made his blood run cold, specifically the figures carved into the walls. Tall and gaunt, their features were sharp, angular, and utterly devoid of any life or emotion. Their eyes, hollow sockets that stared blindly ahead, seemed to burn into Lucius with an otherworldly intensity. He couldn't shake the feeling that these figures, these silent sentinels, were watching him, judging him with a cold, alien gaze that saw through all pretense and falsehood. They were ancient, these carvings, older than the city above, older even than Rome itself. They predated any written history, any record of gods or empires, belonging to a time when the world was wild and untamed. They represented a power that was raw and elemental, untouched by civilization, untouched by humanity. But it was the pool in the center of the room that truly captivated Lucius, or perhaps it was the lack of a pool. Where there should have been water, there was only empty darkness, a yawning void that seemed to suck the light and color from everything around it. The current that had carried Lucius through the passage coiled around his legs, pulling him closer to the edge. He could feel its tugging, its urging, its command. But he didn't need to be dragged any closer. His curiosity, his morbid fascination, was pulling him toward the abyss, as surely as if invisible hands were guiding his every step. As he gazed into the inky blackness, shapes began to emerge. They writhed and twisted, taking on grotesque, inhuman forms that seemed to mock his sanity. Were they real or figments of his imagination? He couldn't be sure. What he did know was that he had crossed the line, that he had entered a place he was never meant to see. He could turn back now, flee while he still had the chance. But the thought of leaving, of turning away from the mysteries hidden in the darkness, filled him with a nameless dread. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that if he left now, he would never understand what he had seen, and whatever understanding he might have gained would haunt him for the rest of his days. Taking a deep breath, Lucius stepped closer to the edge. He could feel the current tugging at him now, trying to pull him over the edge and into the darkness. But he resisted, anchoring himself to the spot. With a Herculean effort, he forced himself to stop, to look away from the writhing shadows and into the endless night. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done, far more challenging than any battle or assassination. Yet as he held on, a strange sensation began to wash over him. It was as though he were drowning, not in water, but in meaning, in purpose. The current surged again, stronger than before, pulling with a desperate urgency. But now Lucius understood. This was not a trap. This was a gift. He closed his eyes, letting go of the world and everything in it. As he fell, the current wrapped around him, enveloping him in a warm embrace. For the first time in his life, Lucius felt free. He was falling into the darkness, and he was finally home. The river flowed dark beneath the bustling heart of Rome, reflecting the flickering lights of oil lamps and the pallid glow of marble statues. Here, amid the ruins of a vanished age, Lucius paused, his gaze drawn to a pool of water nestled between time-worn stones. Its surface, usually placid, was now subtly rippling, as though stirred by some unseen breath. He recognized the signs well, for he'd seen them before in his waking dreams. And so, knowing he could not ignore its call, he stepped closer. The water's current began to stir, soft as breath but insistent like a dream that would not let go. Reaching out, Lucius tested its chill, feeling its strength. He watched as the water, disturbed by his touch, spread outward in widening circles. A low hum resonated from within the pool, growing steadily louder until it echoed around him, filling the space between stone and sky. Before him, the pools joined together at the chamber's far end, forming a narrow canal that disappeared into an arched tunnel, carved smooth by time and tide. Emerging from its depths was a soft blue glow, pulsing in rhythm with something older than heartbeat. Older than Rome. From within the earth, the golden light, ever faithful, hovered once more before him, And with a quiet nod to the unknown, Lucius stepped into a small stone skiff resting at the water's edge. Though crafted by a mortal hand, the boat was light as a leaf, borne aloft by unseen currents and guided by a will not his own. It floated gently into the darkness. Within the tunnel, all was still. Walls of crystalline salt and ancient brick gleamed softly in the light, echoing whispers that had no words, just feelings: love, sorrow, longing, peace. Around him, figures swam into view, faces worn by time, yet eyes alight with purpose. They moved with the grace of sleepwalkers, their voices weaving together into a mournful song that spoke of loss and sacrifice, of devotion and enduring hope. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they faded away, leaving Lucius alone in the small boat gliding through the hushed stillness. At the tunnel's end, the darkness fell away, revealing a vast subterranean riverway. Gasping, Lucius stared in wonder. Above him arched a sky of polished obsidian, speckled with luminous stones that glittered like fallen stars. Their soft light painted shifting patterns on the water's surface, turning each ripple into a fleeting jewel. Below, the water ran deep and clear, showing glimpses of what lay buried: mosaics, pillars, coins, and statues, fragments of the city's forgotten self, washed gently by the eternal stream. The river flowed on, its banks fading into the shadows, its path hidden from the eyes of men. Yet somehow, even here, in this place of endless night, the scent of Rome still lingered: baking bread, blooming gardens, the salty tang of the sea carried on the breeze. And then, above the murmur of the stream, Lucius heard a sound that stilled his heart. It was the distant chime of a bell, faint yet clear, resonating with a familiarity that transcended memory. He turned toward the sound, mesmerized, as if drawn by an invisible current. And then he saw her. Seated on a nearby bank, bathed in the soft river light, was a woman unlike any he'd seen before. Her beauty was of a timeless sort, ageless and serene, her features as perfect and unchanging as the stars. Yet it was her eyes that held his gaze, their depths reflecting wisdom beyond mortal ken. In that moment, all thoughts fled his mind. There was only the vision before him, the echo of the bell, and the pull of an ancient longing he could not name. She turned her head slowly, and as she did, the bell chimed again, its notes cascading into the silent air like tears of gold. With a gentle smile, she beckoned to him, and the very air around her seemed to sigh in welcome. In that instant, Lucius knew he must go to her, drawn by a force he could resist no more. The boat moved forward on its own, gliding silently toward the waiting shore. As he stepped out of the boat, solid ground beneath his feet, Lucius felt a profound sense of homecoming, as if he had journeyed for a lifetime to reach this place. The woman rose, and as she did, the river around them swirled, forming a path of sparkling water leading directly to her outstretched hand. In her palm rested a single white rose, its petals unfurling in the ethereal light. With a soft smile, she offered it to him, and as he took the rose, its fragrance filled his senses, sweet and timeless, untainted by the decay of years. Its thorns, surprisingly sharp, pricked his fingers, drawing blood that mingled with the water, turning it crimson. Unfazed, the woman dipped her fingers into the red pool, and as she did, the water around them surged, rising until it formed a mirror, reflecting images both familiar and strange. In one image, Lucius saw himself, yet not as he was, but as he might have been, standing in the shadow of the Colosseum, a laurel crown upon his brow, the roar of the crowd echoing around him. Another vision showed him as an artist, his hands stained with the colors of the sunset as he painted the face of a beloved, their laughter mingling with the scent of blooming jasmine. Then he saw himself as a scholar, poring over ancient texts, their faded words whispering secrets of a forgotten lore. All these lives flickered in the mirror, each holding a piece of the man he could be, each offering a glimpse of the choices that lay before him. Before him, the woman dipped her fingers into the water once more, and this time as she did, the reflection shifted, showing him a different path. In it he saw the same laurel crown, but upon his brow it was twisted, its leaves wilting, its berries black and shriveled. The crowd's roar became a menacing growl, their cheers turning into jeers and taunts. The scent of the beloved faded, replaced by the coppery reek of blood. The pages of the ancient texts fluttered away, their secrets lost to the winds of change. As he watched, the image waned, leaving behind a profound emptiness, a chilling premonition of what could be if he chose unwisely. With a gentle touch, the woman's fingers brushed his cheek, and as she did, the mirror cleared, revealing only her own reflection, her eyes filled with understanding. She offered him the rose, its petals now glowing with a soft inner light, and in that gesture he saw the choice before him, the path of glory and the path of shadow. With a heavy heart, Lucius realized that every decision, every step he took in life would lead him further from this place, from her. From the tranquil waters of the river, beneath the river, the rose trembled in his hand, its petals falling away, revealing a single drop of water at its heart. As he brought it to his lips, its taste was like nectar, sweet and invigorating, filling him with a sudden surge of clarity. Before him, the woman vanished, the bell's chime fading into silence. The river flowed on, its gentle current urging him onward. He stood there for a long moment, letting the river's rhythm resound within him, until the echoes of her farewell reached his ears, carried on the wind. As the first rays of dawn touched the sky, Lucius emerged from the cave, blinking against the sudden brightness. Behind him, the river flowed on, its entrance hidden from view. In his hand, he clutched the vial containing the last drop of water from the river, beneath the river, its surface shimmering with a faint inner light. He turned to go, knowing that he could never truly leave that place behind. For now, it was a secret held close within him, a guiding light in the darkness of his waking hours. As he walked away, the cave entrance rumbled softly, as if in slumber, and from its depths, the faint chime of a bell drifted into the morning air.